Jack Riley's clipboard trembled slightly as he stared at the permit number. He'd checked it 3 times now, cross-referencing the municipal database on his phone while standing in Boyd Kessler's driveway. The rooftop patio that shouldn't exist stretched above him like a middle finger pointed at city ordinances, but that wasn't what made his stomach drop. It was Vanessa's silver Honda CR-V parked behind Boyd's F-150, tucked just far enough back that casual observers might miss it. His wife had left for work 2 hours ago, claiming a client meeting in Towson. The flooring company where she worked as regional marketing coordinator was 15 miles east. Boyd's house sat directly behind theirs, separated by a chain-link fence and 37 years of polite neighbor relations. Jack pulled out his phone and called the office. Municipal inspections, Jack Riley speaking. Jack, it's Carol. You get to that Kessler complaint yet? I'm here now. Illegal rooftop deck, no permits filed. Probably need to issue a stop work order. Copy that. Any pushback from the owner? Jack watched Boyd emerge from his back door, coffee mug in hand, that familiar cocky grin already forming. We'll see. Boyd approached with the swagger of a man who'd never been told no by anyone who mattered. At 45, he still carried himself like the high school football star he'd once been, gut straining against his Carhartt shirt, tool belt hanging low on his hips like a gunslinger's rig. Morning, Jack. Hell of a thing, having the city inspector live right next door. Boyd's laugh had edges. Makes a man careful about his projects. Should have made you careful about permits. Jack tapped his clipboard. This deck isn't in the system. No building permit, no zoning approval, no structural engineer sign-off. Now hold on, Boyd set his mug on the porch railing. I got all my paperwork in order. Your wife handled most of it herself, actually. Real professional lady. Understanding of modern design, you know? Not everyone appreciates what makes a property special. The words hung between them like smoke. Jack felt something cold settle in his chest. A familiar numbness that had served him well through 16 years of marriage and 22 years of civil service. He made a note on his clipboard, precise block letters that gave away nothing. I'll need to see those permits. Sure thing. Vanessa said they might take a few days to show up in your system, something about processing delays. Boyd's smile never wavered. She mentioned you're pretty thorough with your work. Lucky woman, having a husband who pays attention to details. Jack finished writing and looked up. Boyd was watching him with the patience of a cat outside a mouse hole. Behind the house, a mockingbird ran through its repertoire of stolen songs. I'll be back Thursday with the stop work order. Have your paperwork ready. Will do, neighbor. Jack walked back to his city-issued Ford Focus, feeling Boyd's eyes on his shoulders. He didn't look back at the Honda or wonder what Vanessa was doing inside Boyd's house at 10:30 on a Tuesday morning. He'd learned long ago that some questions answered themselves if you waited long enough. The drive back to City Hall took 12 minutes through residential streets lined with aging colonials and split levels, most built in the 70s when this part of Baltimore County still felt suburban instead of forgotten. Jack parked in his assigned spot and walked through the familiar maze of beige corridors to his cubicle in the Department of Building Standards. His desk held the organized chaos of a man who'd spent 2 decades enforcing codes most people never thought about. Permit applications, violation notices, inspection reports, all color-coded and filed with military precision. Jack opened his computer and pulled up the municipal database, typing in Boyd's address. Nothing. No permits, no applications, no preliminary inquiries. According to the city's records, Boyd Kessler had never filed paperwork for anything more complicated than a garden shed. Jack opened a second window and accessed the employee portal. Every permit required staff approval at multiple levels, with digital signatures tracking the chain of authorization. He entered Vanessa's employee ID. She'd worked part-time for the county zoning office during their first years of marriage before switching to private sector marketing. Her credentials were still active. He scrolled through recent transactions tied to her ID. 3 approvals in the past 6 months, all for residential projects, all signed off with her digital signature. The Boyd Kessler rooftop deck permit sat at the top of the list, approved 2 weeks ago with a note, homeowner variance granted for aesthetic compatibility with neighborhood standards. Jack stared at the screen until his eyes watered. Then he printed the page, folded it carefully, and slipped it into his jacket pocket next to his phone. The rest of the day crawled by with glacial bureaucratic pace. Elevator inspections at 2 office buildings, a safety audit at the new shopping center on Route 1, paperwork that demanded attention while his mind circled the same questions like water around a drain. At 5:15, he drove home through rush hour traffic that gave him too much time to think. Their duplex sat on Maple Street in a development that had seemed promising in 2003 when they'd bought it with VA loan money and optimistic plans. 20 years later, the neighborhood showed its age in cracked driveways and chain-link fences, in for sale signs that stayed up too long and rental properties that changed hands every few months. Vanessa's Honda sat in their driveway, engine ticking as it cooled. Jack parked behind it and walked through the front door into the smell of something burning. "That you, Jack?" Vanessa's voice carried from the kitchen, pitched higher than usual. "I'm making dinner. Be ready in 10 minutes." Jack hung his jacket on the hall tree and walked toward the kitchen. Vanessa stood at the stove, stirring something in a pan while smoke curled up from the burner. She'd changed out of her work clothes into yoga pants and a Ravens t-shirt, hair pulled back in a ponytail that made her look younger than 38. "How was your day?" She didn't turn around. "Routine inspections, you?" "Client meetings. Boring stuff." The stirring became more aggressive. "Did you remember we're supposed to go to Boyd and Evelyn's Easter thing on Sunday? I already told them we'd be there." Jack opened the refrigerator and pulled out a beer. "What's the occasion?" "Just neighbors being neighborly. Boyd's been working on that deck project, wants to show it off." She glanced over her shoulder, quick and nervous. "You should probably take a look at it sometime." "Professional opinion." "Already did. This morning." The stirring stopped. "Oh, what did you think?" "Needs permits." Vanessa turned back to the stove. "I'm sure he'll get that sorted out. Boyd's pretty thorough about following rules." Jack took a long pull from his beer and watched his wife's shoulders tense under the Ravens logo. 20 years of marriage had taught him to read her tells. The way she touched her neck when she lied. How her voice went up half an octave when she was hiding something. The careful precision of her words when she was working too hard to sound casual. "Dinner's ready," she announced, spooning whatever she'd been cooking onto 2 plates. "Let's eat in the living room. There's a documentary I want to watch." They ate in front of the television, some nature program about hunters and prey, while Vanessa provided running commentary about camera angles and editing techniques. Jack made appropriate responses and finished his beer, thinking about permit numbers and digital signatures and his wife's car parked behind Boyd's truck at 10:30 in the morning. After dinner, Vanessa went upstairs to take a bath. Jack loaded the dishwasher and wiped down the counters, then walked into their bedroom and opened the top drawer of Vanessa's dresser. Under the stack of winter scarves she never wore, his fingers found a small jewelry box he'd never seen before. Inside, wrapped in tissue paper, lay a pair of silver earrings. The receipt was folded underneath. Henderson Jewelers, February 14th, $340. Their wedding anniversary was in October. Vanessa's birthday fell in September. Jack refolded the receipt and returned everything to its place. From the bathroom came the sound of running water and Vanessa humming something he didn't recognize. He walked downstairs and opened another beer, then sat in his recliner and thought about Valentine's Day gifts, hidden in dresser drawers, and permit approvals that shouldn't exist. The next morning brought gray skies and the kind of April chill that reminded you winter wasn't really gone. Jack arrived at the office early and spent an hour reviewing Boyd's construction permits, cross-referencing approval dates with staff schedules and authorization protocols. By 8:30, he had a clear picture of what had happened. Someone with administrative access had created false permits using Vanessa's credentials. The digital signatures were authentic, but the approvals circumvented normal review processes. 3 projects, all connected to Boyd Kessler either as contractor or homeowner. All approved outside standard procedures. Jack printed the documentation and walked down the hall to legal services. Marla Riley, his younger sister by 4 years and a paralegal with the county attorney's office, looked up from her computer with the expression of someone expecting bad news. "What's wrong?" she asked. "You look like somebody died. I need a favor, confidential." Marla gestured to the chair across from her desk. At 37, she'd inherited their father's sharp features and their mother's inability to suffer fools, a combination that served her well in legal work and family disputes. "Talk to me." Jack handed her the printed permits. "These approvals were processed using fake credentials. I need to know what kind of criminal liability we're looking at." Marla scanned the documents, her expression growing more serious with each page. "This is fraud, possibly conspiracy if multiple people were involved. Who had access to these credentials?" "That's the problem." "Jack!" Marla set the papers down. "Is Vanessa involved in this?" "I don't know yet, but I need to find out without tipping anyone off." "Crap." Marla leaned back in her chair. "You want my advice? Document everything. Get copies of all communications, financial records, anything that might be relevant. And do it fast." before someone realizes they're exposed. Can you help? Unofficially, maybe. But Jack, she met his eyes. If Vanessa's involved in permit fraud, this isn't just about your marriage. This is criminal. Jack took the papers back. I know. What are you going to do? Whatever needs doing. The Easter gathering at Boyd and Evelyn's house started at 3 o'clock on a Sunday afternoon that felt more like November than April. Jack stood in their backyard nursing a beer and watching Vanessa charm the other neighbors with stories about flooring trends and home renovation shows. Boyd had outdone himself with the party setup. The illegal rooftop deck served as the centerpiece, accessed by a new set of stairs that probably also violated building codes. Tiki torches lined the perimeter, casting flickering shadows across picnic tables loaded with barbecue and sides. A cooler full of beer sat next to a speaker playing classic rock at conversation-killing volume. "Hell of a deck," said Tom Brewster from 3 houses down. "Must have cost a fortune." "Worth every penny," Boyd replied, appearing at Jack's elbow with the territorial smile of a dog marking its territory. Had to jump through some bureaucratic hoops, but Vanessa helped smooth the way. She knows how to work the system. Jack watched his wife laugh at something Jim Patterson had said, her hand resting briefly on the older man's arm. She wore a sundress that showed off her figure and heels that made walking on grass a balancing act. Her makeup was perfect, her smile bright enough to power the tiki torches. "She's good at her job," Jack said. "Best in the business." Boyd's voice carried the satisfaction of a man sharing a private joke. "Smart, attractive. Knows what men want. Lucky you got her locked down before someone else figured that out." The words hit like a physical blow, but Jack's expression never changed. He'd learned long ago to keep his reactions internal, to process information without broadcasting his thoughts. It was a survival skill learned in childhood and refined through decades of dealing with contractors who thought building codes were suggestions. "Excuse me," Jack said, and walked toward the house. He found Evelyn Kessler in the kitchen, refilling a platter of deviled eggs. Boyd's wife was a thin woman in her early 40s with prematurely gray hair and the patient expression of someone accustomed to managing her husband's excesses. "Need help with anything?" Jack asked. "Just restocking the food." Evelyn glanced toward the backyard. "Boyd loves showing off that deck. Been planning it for months." "Interesting timing. Most people wait for warmer weather to start construction projects." "Oh, he started back in February. Had some delays with permits and inspections, but your wife was very helpful. She made several trips over to help sort things out." The kitchen suddenly felt too small. Jack forced himself to breathe normally. "Vanessa's thorough that way. She's lovely. You're lucky to have someone so understanding." The way Evelyn said the word made Jack wonder exactly how much the woman knew about her husband's extracurricular activities. He excused himself and walked back outside, where the party was hitting its booze-fueled stride. Vanessa stood near the deck stairs, deep in conversation with Boyd. They weren't touching, but their body language spoke volumes. The way she tilted her head when he talked. How he leaned in slightly when she laughed. The subtle dance of two people pretending they weren't intimately familiar with each other. Jack finished his beer and decided he'd seen enough. "Ready to head home?" he asked Vanessa. "Already? The party's just getting started." "I've got early inspections tomorrow." Vanessa's smile flickered. 5 more minutes? I'll be in the car." Jack said his goodbyes and walked through Boyd's house to the front yard. Through the living room window, he could see Vanessa still talking to Boyd, their heads closer together now that they thought no one was watching. Her hand brushed his arm as she laughed at something he said. 20 minutes later, Vanessa climbed into the passenger seat with the flushed cheeks of someone who'd had too much sun and wine. "Nice party," she said. Boyd really did a great job on that deck. Very professional work." Jack started the engine. "How many times did you visit his house during the permit process?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Vanessa stared straight ahead, her hands folded in her lap. "I don't know. A few times." "Why?" "Just curious about your process. It's not complicated. Site visit, review plans, file paperwork, standard procedure." Jack backed out of Boyd's driveway and headed home. In his peripheral vision, he could see Vanessa watching him, trying to read his expression in the dashboard light. "Jack, is everything okay?" "Fine. You seem distant lately? Like something's bothering you." Jack turned onto their street. "Just work stuff. Maybe we should plan a weekend away, somewhere nice, just the two of us." "Maybe." They finished the drive in silence. Inside the house, Vanessa went upstairs to change while Jack sat in his recliner and thought about silver earrings and permit fraud and his wife's hand on Boyd Kessler's arm. When she came back down in her pajamas, he was still sitting there, staring at nothing. "I'm going to bed," she announced. "You coming up?" "In a few minutes." Vanessa hesitated at the bottom of the stairs. "Jack, we're okay, right? I mean, we're good?" Jack looked at his wife of 20 years, taking in her anxious expression and defensive posture. She knew, maybe not how much he knew, but she knew something had shifted. "We're fine, Vanessa." She nodded and went upstairs. Jack waited until he heard the bedroom door close, then walked to his home office and opened his laptop. He had work to do. The next 3 weeks passed in careful routine. Jack went to work, conducted his inspections, filed his reports, and came home to eat dinner with his wife while they watched television and made small talk about weather and neighborhood gossip. To outside observers, they probably looked like any middle-aged couple settling into comfortable predictability, but Jack was building a case. He started with financial records, using his access to county systems to trace the paper trail of Boyd's construction projects. The rooftop deck was just the beginning. Over the past year, Boyd had pulled permits for 3 major renovations, all approved through irregular channels, all bearing Vanessa's digital signature. The dollar amounts were substantial. Boyd's construction business operated on thin margins in a competitive market. The ability to fast-track permits gave him significant advantages over legitimate contractors who followed proper procedures. Jack estimated the fraudulent approvals had generated at least $50,000 in additional revenue for Boyd's company. He documented everything: bank records, permit applications, approval timestamps, communication logs. He printed hard copies and stored them in a filing cabinet at work, away from the house where Vanessa might discover them. The surveillance came next. Jack borrowed a trail camera from the Parks Department, officially for a routine safety inspection of city-owned properties. He installed it in the oak tree that overlooked Boyd's driveway, angled to capture both the front door and the area where vehicles parked. The camera was motion-activated and uploaded images to a secure server. Within a week, he had what he needed. Vanessa's Honda appeared in Boyd's driveway every Tuesday and Thursday, always between 10 and noon. Always when Evelyn was at her part-time job at the elementary school. The timestamps showed a pattern going back at least 2 months, probably longer. Jack saved the images to an encrypted folder and continued his investigation. Phone records required more creativity. Jack couldn't access Vanessa's personal cell phone without legal authorization, but he could review the county's communication systems. Every permit approval generated automatic notifications to registered contractors. He pulled the logs for Boyd's projects and found dozens of calls between Boyd's business line and the county zoning office, many lasting 15 or 20 minutes. The calls always came from Boyd's personal cell phone, not his business line. And they were always answered by Vanessa's direct extension. On a Thursday morning in early May, Jack made his move. He arrived at Boyd's construction site on Loch Raven Road at 8:30, just as the crew was setting up for the day. The project was a kitchen renovation in a 1950s Cape Cod, the kind of straightforward job that kept small contractors in business. Boyd stood near his truck reviewing blueprints when Jack pulled up in the city Ford. "Morning, Jack. This is a surprise." "Routine inspection." Jack pulled out his clipboard. "Someone filed a complaint about noise ordinance violations." Boyd's expression tightened. "What kind of complaint?" "Concerned citizen? You know how it is." Jack made a show of checking his watch. "I'll need to see your permits and insurance documentation." "Sure thing." Boyd walked to his truck and opened the glove compartment. While his back was turned, Jack slipped a small smoke device behind the front tire, a training tool borrowed from the fire department's safety equipment. The device would produce thick white smoke for approximately 3 minutes, enough to trigger an evacuation without causing actual danger. "Here you go." Boyd handed over a folder of paperwork. Jack reviewed the documents, taking his time. Everything appeared legitimate, which meant Boyd was learning to cover his tracks. The illegal shortcuts were becoming more sophisticated. "Looks good," Jack said, returning the folder. "I'll just do a quick walkthrough." They entered the house through the front door. The renovation was extensive. Walls removed, electrical updated, new plumbing roughed in. It was quality work, Jack had to admit. Boyd might be a fraud and an adulterer, but he knew construction. "Kitchen's going to be beautiful when it's finished," Boyd said. "Open concept, granite countertops, custom cabinets. Homeowner's got good taste." Jack nodded and made notes on his clipboard. Through the kitchen window, he could see Boyd's crew installing new siding on the exterior wall. Professional, efficient work. How long until completion? 3 weeks, maybe 4? Depends on the cabinet delivery. Jack's phone buzzed with a text message. He glanced at the screen, a pre-programmed reminder he'd set for exactly this moment. "I need to check something outside," he said. They walked back through the front door just as white smoke began billowing from beneath Boyd's truck. Within seconds, the smoke cloud expanded to engulf half the driveway. Jesus Christ! Boyd ran toward his vehicle. "Fire! Everybody out!" The construction crew dropped their tools and scattered toward the street. Boyd yanked open his truck door, searching for the source of the smoke. Jack activated the emergency protocols, calling the fire department while directing the workers to a safe distance. "Engine 23, this is Inspector Riley at 1247 Loch Raven. We have a possible vehicle fire requesting immediate response." The smoke device burned out after 3 minutes, leaving behind only the acrid smell of burned chemicals and a coating of white residue on Boyd's truck. The fire department arrived 7 minutes later, followed by a police unit and an ambulance. Fire Captain Stevens examined the scene and shook his head. "No fire damage. Looks like someone set off a smoke flare or training device." "Vandalism?" Jack asked. "Maybe. Or someone's idea of a prank." Stevens looked at Boyd, who stood beside his truck with soot-stained hands and a bewildered expression. "You have any enemies, Mr. Kessler?" "Not that I know of." The firefighters packed up their equipment and left. The police officer took a brief report and promised to file it with the appropriate detectives. The construction crew drifted back to work, muttering about crazy people and insurance claims. Jack found Boyd in the backyard, hosing white residue off his hands. "Hell of a thing," Jack said. "Yeah." Boyd dried his hands on a shop rag. "Weird coincidence, you being here when it happened." "Just doing my job." Boyd studied Jack's face, looking for something he couldn't identify. "You know, we've been neighbors for, 15 years? But I feel like I don't really know you. Not much to know. See, that's what I mean. You're always so controlled, like nothing ever gets to you." Jack made a final note on his clipboard. "Some things aren't worth getting upset about. And some things are—" The words carried weight beyond their surface meaning. Boyd was testing him, trying to gauge how much Jack knew and what he planned to do about it. "I'll file my report this afternoon," Jack said. "No violations found." "Appreciate it." Jack walked back to his car, feeling Boyd's eyes on his back. The smoke device had served its purpose, not just as a distraction, but as a message. Boyd now knew that unexpected things could happen at any time, in any place. The illusion of safety was gone. That evening, Jack sat in his home office reviewing the documentation he'd assembled over the past month. Financial records, permit fraud, photographic evidence of the affair, communication logs showing the pattern of illegal approvals. It was a comprehensive case that would destroy both Vanessa and Boyd if handled properly. The question was how to deploy it for maximum effect. Marla had outlined the legal options during their last conversation. Criminal charges for permit fraud would likely result in felony convictions for both conspirators. Vanessa would lose her job and face possible prison time. Boyd would be banned from municipal contracting and probably lose his business license. But Jack wanted more than legal justice. He wanted total destruction. He opened a new document on his computer and began typing. The anonymous complaint to the State Board of Professional Standards went out on Friday morning, carefully crafted to trigger an immediate investigation into permit irregularities in Baltimore County. Jack included enough specific details to ensure the investigators would focus on Boyd's projects while maintaining plausible deniability about the source. The complaint to Vanessa's employer followed on Monday, sent from an encrypted email account to the flooring company's internal compliance department. Jack had researched the company's ethics policies and knew they had zero tolerance for employees involved in fraudulent activities that could damage the company's reputation. By Wednesday, both investigations were underway. Jack learned about the progress through official channels and careful observation. The county investigators arrived at Boyd's construction sites unannounced, demanding to see permits and insurance documentation. They interviewed subcontractors and reviewed financial records, following the paper trail that led inevitably back to the fraudulent approvals. Vanessa's employer launched an internal audit of her county work, focusing on any potential conflicts of interest between her part-time county position and her full-time marketing job. The investigation was thorough and aggressive, the kind of corporate response designed to protect the company from liability. Jack watched his wife grow increasingly nervous as the walls closed in. She checked her phone constantly, jumped at unexpected sounds, and asked careful questions about his work that barely concealed her anxiety. "Everything okay at the office?" she asked over dinner one Thursday evening. Routine stuff. Why? I heard there were some investigations going on. County employees, permit irregularities, that kind of thing. Jack chewed his pot roast thoughtfully. Where did you hear that? Office gossip. You know how people talk. People talk about all kinds of things. Most of it's nonsense. Vanessa nodded, but her hands shook slightly as she reached for her water glass. She knew the net was tightening, but she didn't know how much Jack knew or what he planned to do with the information. The breaking point came on a Friday afternoon in late May. Jack was reviewing inspection reports when his phone rang. The caller ID showed his sister's number. Marla? Jack, you need to get over here right now. Boyd Kessler's wife just walked into our office asking about divorce procedures. Evelyn? She knows, Jack, about Boyd and Vanessa. Someone sent her photographs. Jack felt a cold satisfaction settle in his chest. What kind of photographs? The kind that end marriages. She's here with a lawyer, talking about infidelity and fraud charges. This is about to get very messy. I'll be right there. Jack drove to the county office complex in record time, his mind racing through the implications. He hadn't sent the photographs to Evelyn. That particular bomb had been set aside for later use. Someone else was playing the game now, possibly Boyd trying to get ahead of the story, or Vanessa attempting damage control. He found Marla in the hallway outside the legal offices, her expression grim. How bad is it? He asked. Bad. Evelyn has video footage of Boyd and Vanessa together. Intimate footage. Apparently, Boyd was stupid enough to install security cameras in his bedroom. Jesus. It gets worse. The footage shows them discussing the permit fraud. Vanessa's on camera talking about falsifying approvals and splitting the profits. Jack processed this information. Boyd had been recording their encounters, probably for blackmail purposes or simple ego gratification. But the recordings also captured evidence of the criminal conspiracy, evidence that would destroy both of them in court. Where is Evelyn now? Conference room B. She wants to file charges against both of them, criminal and civil. Her lawyer's drawing up the paperwork. Jack walked to the conference room and knocked on the door. Evelyn Kessler looked up from a stack of legal documents, her eyes red from crying, but her expression determined. Jack, what are you doing here? Marla told me what happened. I'm sorry, Evelyn. Are you? She studied his face. Or did you already know about your wife and my husband? Jack sat down across from her. I suspected. How long? A few months. I've been investigating. Evelyn's lawyer, a sharp-featured woman in her 50s, leaned forward. What kind of investigating? The permit fraud, financial records, communication logs. Jack met the lawyer's eyes. I can provide documentation. We'll need everything you have, the lawyer said. This case is going to be about more than infidelity. We're talking about criminal conspiracy, fraud, possibly racketeering if we can prove a pattern of illegal activity. Evelyn pushed a manila folder across the table. These are copies of the recordings. I thought you should see them before they become public. Jack opened the folder and found himself staring at still images captured from video surveillance. Boyd and Vanessa in various states of undress, but also sitting on Boyd's bed fully clothed, reviewing documents and discussing permit applications. In one image, Vanessa held a stack of papers while Boyd pointed at something on his laptop screen. The timestamp showed the date was 3 weeks ago during one of her supposed client meetings. They were planning to expand the operation, Evelyn said. Boyd wanted to bring in other contractors, create a whole network of fake permits. Vanessa was going to recruit county employees to help process the applications. Jack closed the folder. What do you want from me? Testimony, documentation, whatever evidence you've collected. The lawyer pulled out a legal pad. Will you cooperate with our investigation? Yes. Good. We'll need you to sign an affidavit detailing your knowledge of the fraud scheme. The criminal charges will be filed early next week. Jack nodded and stood up. Evelyn, I'm sorry this happened to both of us. No, you're not. She smiled sadly. You're angry, just like I am. The difference is, you're better at hiding it. Jack left the county office and drove home through afternoon traffic, his mind already working through the next phase of his plan. The legal machinery was now in motion, grinding toward inevitable conclusions that would destroy Vanessa and Boyd, professionally and personally. But Jack wasn't finished. He arrived home to find Vanessa's car missing from the driveway. A note on the kitchen table explained she'd gone shopping and would be back for dinner. Jack walked upstairs to their bedroom and opened the top drawer of Vanessa's dresser. The jewelry box was gone. He searched through the other drawers, finding gaps where items used to be. clothes missing from the closet, toiletries absent from the bathroom counter. Vanessa was packing, probably planning to disappear before the criminal charges were filed. Jack pulled out his phone and called Marla. "She's running," he said when his sister answered. "Can you stop her?" "Not legally, but I can make sure she doesn't get far." Jack spent the next hour making phone calls. By 6 o'clock, he'd frozen their joint bank accounts, canceled Vanessa's credit cards, and filed for emergency separation with the county court. By 7, he'd changed the locks on the house and forwarded Vanessa's mail to a post office box. When Vanessa returned at 8:30, she found her key wouldn't work. Jack opened the front door and handed her a manila envelope. "Legal separation papers. You have 24 hours to collect your personal belongings." Vanessa stared at the envelope as if it contained a bomb. "Jack, we need to talk." "No, we don't. This is all a misunderstanding. Boyd and I, we're just friends." "The permit thing, that was just me helping a neighbor. Nothing illegal." "Evelyn has videotapes." The color drained from Vanessa's face. "What videotapes?" "Boyd's bedroom recordings, very thorough documentation. You're both on camera discussing the fraud conspiracy." Vanessa sat down heavily on the front steps. "Oh, God." "Criminal charges are being filed Monday morning. Your employer already knows about the investigation. You'll probably be arrested by Wednesday." "Jack, please, we can work this out. I made some mistakes, but we can fix this." "No, we can't." Vanessa looked up at him with desperate eyes. 20 years, Jack. That has to count for something." "It does. That's why I'm giving you 24 hours instead of calling the police right now." Jack closed the door and walked back inside, leaving Vanessa sitting on the steps in the gathering darkness. Through the living room window, he watched her make phone calls, probably trying to reach Boyd or arrange temporary shelter. After an hour, she drove away. Jack poured himself a beer and sat in his recliner, thinking about the next phase of his plan. The legal destruction was already underway, but he wanted Boyd to understand the full scope of what was happening. He wanted the man to know exactly who was responsible for his downfall. Saturday morning brought gray skies and the promise of rain. Jack drove to Boyd's house and found him in the backyard, dismantling the illegal rooftop deck with power tools and profanity. Scattered lumber suggested he'd been working since dawn. "Destroying evidence?" Jack asked. Boyd looked up from the circular saw, sweat staining his shirt despite the cool weather. "Getting rid of problems. Little late for that, is it?" Boyd set down the saw and walked over to the property line fence. "See, I've been thinking about our situation. You know about Vanessa and me. I know about your little investigation. Maybe we can work something out." "What kind of arrangement?" "You back off the permit stuff, I disappear from Vanessa's life. Clean break, everybody moves on." Jack almost smiled. "You think I care about saving my marriage? Don't you? 20 years ago, maybe. Now?" Jack shrugged. "I'm more interested in consequences." Boyd's expression hardened. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means you made a mistake when you decided to screw my wife. Bigger mistake when you involved her in your permit fraud. But the biggest mistake was thinking I wouldn't notice." "You threatening me?" "I'm explaining reality. Criminal charges Monday, civil suits Tuesday, professional sanctions by the end of the week. Your business license gets revoked, your contractor bonds get canceled, your insurance company drops you for fraud. 6 months from now, you'll be lucky to get a job hanging drywall for somebody else." Boyd stepped closer to the fence. "And Vanessa?" "Vanessa's problem now is staying out of prison. She doesn't have time to worry about you." The two men stared at each other across the chain-link barrier that had separated their properties for 15 years. Boyd's hands clenched and unclenched at his sides, the knuckles scarred from decades of construction work. "You're enjoying this," Boyd said. "More than I expected. What kind of man destroys his own wife?" "The kind whose wife destroys herself." Jack checked his watch. "You've got about 36 hours before the arrest warrants are issued. I'd use that time wisely." Jack walked back to his car, leaving Boyd standing among the scattered remains of his illegal deck. In the rearview mirror, he watched the man kick a pile of lumber, sending 2x4s flying across the yard like oversized pickup sticks. Phase 3 was about to begin. Monday morning arrived with thunderstorms and the kind of humidity that made Baltimore feel like a swamp. Jack arrived at work early and spent the first hour reviewing his calendar, making sure he'd be available when the arrests happened. The call came at 10:15. "Jack, it's Detective Morrison, Baltimore County. We've got your wife and Boyd Kessler in custody. Fraud charges, conspiracy, filing false documents. You available for an interview this afternoon? I'll be there at 2. Jack spent his lunch hour at the police station, providing formal testimony about the permit fraud and his investigation. Detective Morrison was thorough and professional, asking detailed questions about timelines and evidence while a stenographer recorded every word. "This is a solid case," Morrison said afterward. "Your documentation makes our job easy. Both defendants are looking at felony charges, probably 2 to 5 years if convicted." "What about bail?" "Kessler made bail this morning. Your wife's still in holding, waiting for her lawyer." Jack drove back to work and spent the afternoon conducting routine inspections, maintaining the facade of normalcy while his personal life imploded in spectacular fashion. By 5 o'clock, the local news had picked up the story. County employee arrested in permit fraud scheme. Vanessa's mugshot appeared on the evening broadcast, her carefully maintained appearance replaced by the hollow-eyed look of someone whose world had collapsed overnight. The reporter mentioned her employment with both the county and the flooring company, ensuring maximum damage to her professional reputation. Jack watched the coverage from his recliner, eating takeout Chinese food and planning his next move. Vanessa would be released on bail within 24 hours, probably to her sister's house in Annapolis. Boyd would hunker down and wait for his lawyer to work out a plea deal. Both of them would assume the worst was over. They were wrong. Tuesday morning brought a cascade of consequences that Jack had orchestrated over the previous weeks. Vanessa's employer announced her immediate termination in a company-wide email that cited serious allegations of criminal misconduct incompatible with our corporate values. Boyd's business insurance was canceled due to the fraud charges, effectively shutting down his construction company. The state licensing board opened an investigation that would likely result in permanent revocation of his contractor's license. But Jack wasn't finished. He'd spent months studying Boyd's financial situation, using his access to county records and public databases to map the man's assets and vulnerabilities. Boyd's business operated on thin margins with heavy debt loads. The loss of insurance and bonding meant he couldn't complete existing contracts, triggering penalty clauses that would drain his remaining cash reserves. Jack made a series of anonymous phone calls to Boyd's creditors, providing detailed information about the criminal charges and suggesting they might want to accelerate payment schedules for outstanding loans. Within hours, Boyd was facing demands for immediate repayment on his equipment financing, his commercial line of credit, and the second mortgage on his house. The financial pressure was designed to force Boyd into increasingly desperate decisions. Jack wanted him to feel the walls closing in from every direction, to understand that his comfortable life was dissolving piece by piece. Wednesday brought the first signs that the pressure was working. Jack was reviewing permit applications when his phone rang. The caller ID showed Boyd's number. "We need to talk," Boyd said without preamble. "About what?" "You know what? This has gone far enough." "Has it?" "Meet me at the construction site on Loch Raven, 1 hour." The line went dead. Jack stared at his phone, considering the implications. Boyd was panicking, probably planning some kind of confrontation that he thought would resolve the situation in his favor. The man had spent his entire adult life solving problems with intimidation and physical dominance. He couldn't conceive of an opponent who operated by different rules. Jack made copies of his most important files and left them in Marla's office with instructions to open them if anything happened to him. Then he drove to the construction site, arriving 15 minutes early to assess the situation. The house renovation was abandoned. Work stopped when Boyd's insurance was canceled. Tools and materials sat where the crew had left them, covered by plastic tarps that flapped in the wind like prayer flags. Boyd's truck was parked in the driveway, but there was no sign of the man himself. Jack parked across the street and waited. At exactly 4 o'clock, Boyd emerged from the house carrying something in his right hand. Even from a distance, Jack could see it was a hammer, the 20-ounce framing hammer that was Boyd's tool of choice for heavy work. Jack got out of his car and walked across the street, moving slowly to avoid triggering Boyd's fight-or-flight response. The man was clearly agitated, pacing back and forth in front of the house like a caged animal. "You came," Boyd said. "You called. This ends here. Whatever game you're playing, it stops now." Jack stopped 10 feet away just outside the range of the hammer. "What game is that?" "Don't play stupid with me. The phone calls to my creditors, the anonymous tips to the licensing board, the leaked information to the press. That's all you—" "Can you prove it?" Boyd raised the hammer, testing its weight. "I don't need to prove anything. I just need you to back off." "Or what?" Or I'll knock you to end with this hammer and tell the police it was self-defense. You came to my job site, threatened me, I defended myself. Who's going to contradict that story? Jack looked around the empty construction site. No witnesses, no security cameras, no one to corroborate either version of events. Boyd had chosen his ground carefully. Interesting plan, Jack said. One problem. What's that? Jack pulled a small device from his pocket and held it up for Boyd to see. I've been recording this conversation. Your threat to eliminate me is now documented evidence. Boyd stared at the device, his face cycling through confusion, anger, and fear. You're bluffing. Audio and video, high definition. Already uploaded to a secure server. Jack put the device back in his pocket. So, go ahead, take your best shot. See how well your self-defense story holds up when the jury hears you threatening to knock me to passing. The hammer wavered in Boyd's grip. He was a man accustomed to simple solutions, direct action that produced immediate results. The complexity of Jack's manipulations was beyond his ability to counter. What do you want? Boyd asked. I want you to understand something. This isn't about Vanessa anymore. This isn't about the permit fraud or the money or any of the other B's you've been telling yourself. This is about you thinking you could take what was mine without consequences. She came to me, Jack. I didn't chase after your wife. She was unhappy looking for something you couldn't give her. Maybe, but you still made a choice, and choices have consequences. Boyd lowered the hammer. So what happens now? Now you lose everything. Your business, your house, your wife, your reputation. Everything you spent 45 years building gets torn down piece by piece. And every time you wonder how it happened, you'll remember this conversation. Jack turned and walked back to his car. Behind him, he heard the hammer hit the ground with a metallic clang. The next phase required patience and careful timing. Jack spent the following weeks monitoring the progress of the criminal cases while implementing the final elements of his revenge plan. Vanessa and Boyd were both facing felony charges that would likely result in prison sentences. But Jack wanted to ensure their destruction was complete and permanent. He started with their social networks. Using anonymous email accounts and careful research, Jack provided detailed information about the affair and fraud charges to Vanessa's friends, family, and professional contacts. He leaked Boyd's arrest photos to neighborhood social media groups and construction industry forums. He ensured that everyone who knew either of them understood exactly what they had done and what it meant. The social ostracism was swift and brutal. Vanessa's friends stopped returning her calls. Boyd's contracting buddies found excuses to avoid him at the local bars, where they'd spent decades drinking together after work. The comfortable social structures that had supported both of them for years simply evaporated. Jack watched the isolation take its toll. Vanessa moved in with her sister but was asked to leave after 2 weeks when the media attention became too intense. Boyd's wife filed for divorce and obtained a restraining order, forcing him to move into a cheap motel while legal proceedings determined the division of their assets. By the end of June, both targets were living in temporary housing, facing criminal trials, and completely cut off from their former support systems. But Jack still wasn't satisfied. The final blow came from an unexpected direction. Jack had been monitoring Boyd's financial situation through public records and credit reports, waiting for the right moment to deliver the coup de grace. That moment arrived when Boyd's mortgage company initiated foreclosure proceedings on his house, citing the fraud charges as a violation of his loan agreement. Boyd was facing the loss of his primary asset, the house that represented his life's work and financial security. In desperation, he approached several contractors about selling his equipment and tools to raise cash for legal fees and living expenses. Jack intercepted those sales. Using intermediaries and cash transactions, he purchased Boyd's entire inventory of construction equipment at below-market prices. The tools that had been Boyd's livelihood for 25 years now sat in a storage unit rented under a false name, leaving the man with nothing but debts and legal problems. The psychological impact was devastating. Boyd had defined himself through his work, his ability to build and create and solve practical problems with his hands. Without his tools, he was just another middle-aged man with a criminal record and no marketable skills. Jack received regular updates on Boyd's deteriorating situation through courthouse contacts and neighborhood gossip. The man was drinking heavily, living on unemployment benefits, and talking openly about self-destruction to anyone who would listen. His wife's divorce attorney was aggressively pursuing his remaining assets, while his criminal defense lawyer was pushing for a plea agreement that would involve significant prison time. Vanessa's situation was equally dire. Her arrest had generated widespread media coverage due to her position with the county government and the photogenic nature of the affair scandal. She was unemployable in her chosen field and facing the possibility of years in federal prison. Her family had largely abandoned her, unable to handle the public embarrassment of her actions. Both targets were approaching complete collapse, their lives destroyed as thoroughly as Jack had planned. But he wanted to ensure they understood exactly how their destruction had been orchestrated, and by whom. The final confrontation came on a sweltering Thursday evening in late July. Jack had been tracking Boyd's movements through social media posts and credit card records, waiting for the right opportunity. That opportunity presented itself when Boyd posted a drunken rant on Facebook about meeting his backstabbing neighbor face-to-face to settle things like men. Boyd was drunk and desperate, exactly the combination Jack had been waiting for. The meeting place was Boyd's abandoned rooftop deck, the illegal construction project that had started everything. Boyd had demanded they meet there at sunset, probably hoping the symbolic location would give him some psychological advantage. Jack arrived early and climbed the stairs to the deck, which was now partially dismantled and surrounded by safety hazards. The city had issued multiple violations for the structure, and it would probably be demolished within the month. Boyd appeared at exactly 8 o'clock, climbing the stairs with the unsteady gait of someone who had been drinking for hours. He carried a beer in one hand and nothing else, apparently having abandoned his earlier plans for violence. "You came," Boyd said, settling heavily into a lawn chair that had seen better days. "You asked." "Asked? I begged, freaking begged you to leave me alone." Boyd took a long pull from his beer. "But you couldn't do that, could you? Had to destroy everything. You destroyed yourself. I just documented the process." "Bees!" Boyd's voice was slurred but angry. "You orchestrated this whole thing. The investigation, the arrests, the financial pressure, everything. You planned it all?" Jack didn't deny it. And I want to know why. "Vanessa, I understand she's your wife, she cheated, you got mad, but why me? Why destroy my whole damn life over a woman you don't even love anymore?" The question hung in the air between them. It was the first time either man had acknowledged the fundamental truth about Jack's motivations. This wasn't about love or marriage or even betrayal. This was about power and control and the satisfaction of watching an enemy suffer. "Because you thought you could," Jack said finally. "You thought you could take my wife, corrupt her into helping you commit crimes, and I'd never figure it out. You thought I was weak. Aren't you? What do you think?" Boyd stared at him across the deck, trying to process the implications. "Jesus Christ, you're a damn psychopath. Maybe, or maybe I'm just better at consequences than you are." They sat in silence as the sun set behind the trees, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. The neighborhood spread out below them, full of houses where normal people lived normal lives without destroying each other over permit fraud and infidelity. "What happens now?" Boyd asked. "Now you serve your time, lose your house, and start over at 45 with nothing but a criminal record and a reputation for fraud. Vanessa does the same thing, except she'll be 40 when she gets out of prison and completely unemployable in any professional capacity. And you? I'll be fine. New house maybe. Fresh start somewhere. Nobody knows about any of this." Boyd finished his beer and threw the empty bottle over the side of the deck, where it shattered on the concrete below. "I hope it was worth it." "It was. Even though you lost your wife in the process?" Jack considered this. "I didn't lose Vanessa. I discarded her. There's a difference." Boyd struggled to his feet, swaying slightly in the evening breeze. "You know what the funny thing is? Vanessa never loved me. She was just using me to get back at you for being emotionally distant. And I was using her to get the permit approvals. We were both using each other, and neither of us gave a crap about the other person." "I know." "So you destroyed 3 lives over something that didn't even matter?" "No. I destroyed 2 lives over something that mattered to me. The fact that it didn't matter to you just proves my point about consequences." Boyd nodded slowly, as if this explanation made perfect sense in his booze-soaked brain. "Fair enough." He walked toward the stairs, then stopped and looked back. "For what it's worth, Jack, I'm sorry. About Vanessa, about the permits, about all of it. I never meant for things to go this far." "Yes, you did. You just never thought you'd get caught." Boyd disappeared down the stairs, leaving Jack alone on the deck as darkness settled over the neighborhood. In the distance, he could hear sirens and traffic, and the normal sounds of a city going about its evening business. Jack's phone buzzed with a text message from Marla. Plea agreements signed. Vanessa gets 18 months, Boyd gets 2 years. Both start serving next month. Jack typed back. Good. He climbed down from the deck and walked to his car, driving through familiar streets that would soon be part of his past. Tomorrow, he would start looking for a new house in a different part of town, somewhere he could rebuild his life without the constant reminders of the last 20 years. 6 weeks later, Jack stood in the driveway of his new house in Catonsville, watching a moving truck disappear around the corner. The house was smaller than the duplex, but newer and more private, set back from the street behind mature oak trees that would provide privacy from curious neighbors. His phone rang as he was checking the mail. The caller ID showed a number he didn't recognize. Jack Riley. Mr. Riley, this is Detective Morrison. I wanted to let you know that Boyd Kessler was found dead in his cell this morning. Apparent self-destruction. Jack felt nothing at all. I see. Thought you should know, given your involvement in the case. There'll probably be some follow-up questions, but it looks pretty straightforward. Left a note apologizing to his family. Thank you for calling. Jack hung up and walked into his new house, thinking about Boyd's final decision and what it meant for the larger story. The man had chosen the easy way out, avoiding years of prison and social humiliation in favor of a quick exit. It was probably the smartest decision he'd made in months. Vanessa would serve her full sentence, emerging from federal prison at age 40 with a felony record and no prospects for rebuilding her life. She would probably end up working retail or food service, struggling to pay rent on a studio apartment while trying to explain to potential employers why she'd spent 2 years in prison for fraud. Jack unpacked his belongings in the new house, setting up his home office and organizing his files with the same methodical precision he'd used to destroy his enemies. The documentation of Vanessa and Boyd's crimes sat in a filing cabinet next to his tax returns and insurance policies, a record of successful planning and execution. 3 months later, Jack was conducting a routine inspection at a shopping center renovation when he encountered a familiar face. Vanessa stood behind the counter of a discount shoe store, wearing a uniform polo shirt and the hollow expression of someone whose life had been permanently derailed. She looked up as he approached, recognition dawning slowly in her eyes. Jack? Vanessa, what are you doing here? Building inspection, routine compliance check. He held up his clipboard. How are you adjusting to civilian life? She glanced around the store, making sure her manager wasn't watching. It's fine. I'm doing fine. Good to hear. Jack? She lowered her voice. Boyd's funeral is next week. Would you consider attending? No. He left a letter, apologizing to everyone he hurt. He mentioned you specifically. I'm not interested. Vanessa nodded, unsurprised by his response. I know you probably hate me for everything that happened, but I want you to know that I'm sorry, really sorry. Not just about getting caught, but about what I did to our marriage. Jack made a note on his clipboard. Your marriage ended the day you decided to help Boyd commit fraud. Everything else was just paperwork. That's not fair. Fair? Jack looked at her across the counter of the discount shoe store where she now worked for minimum wage. You want to talk about fair? Vanessa's face crumpled slightly. No, I guess not. Jack finished his inspection and walked toward the exit. At the door, he turned back to see Vanessa staring after him, her hand pressed against the glass counter as if she were trying to hold herself upright. Vanessa? Yes, don't contact me again, ever. Jack walked out of the store and drove back to his new life, thinking about consequences and justice and the satisfaction of watching everything fall into place exactly as planned. In his rearview mirror, the shopping center grew smaller until it disappeared completely, taking with it the last remnant of his old existence. That evening, Jack sat in his new backyard drinking a beer and watching the sun set through the oak trees. His phone buzzed with a text from Marla. Dinner Sunday? Sarah wants to meet her uncle's new house. Jack typed back, Sounds good, I'll cook. He finished his beer and went inside to check his inspection schedule for the next day. 3 buildings, 2 residential and 1 commercial, all requiring his attention to ensure they met the codes and standards that kept people safe. It was good work, important work that required attention to detail and the ability to spot problems before they became disasters. Jack had always been good at spotting problems, and even better at solving them. He opened his laptop and began typing his reports for the day, precise technical language that described structural integrity and safety compliance in terms that left no room for interpretation. Everything level, everything according to code, everything exactly as it should be. And finally, everything was the end.